to the Sugar and Spikes podcast, a show for everyone trying to navigate business and life without losing their minds. I'm Dez, a coach and consultant who is entirely overeducated, habitually overdressed, and obnoxiously honest.
And I'm Tammy. I'm a psychologist. Was I supposed to say more?
You know what? Enough said. We talk about mindset, mental health, and making it all work in the big, bad business world.
One quick note. We may be mental health professionals, but we're not your mental health professionals.
So, enjoy the show. Hi, everyone. Wow, my mic is really far away.
Let's try again.
Hi, everyone. I did such a spunky opening and then realized that my mic was far away, but
Nobody heard your spunk.
hey, y'all. Or hey, girl, hey. I was on the internet last night, and Tammy was with me while I was bitching about it last night, but someone was like, I really don't like it when grown women call other grown women girl. And I'm just like, I would 100 times rather be called girl than ma'am.
Oh, yes.
Like, if you were to be like, listen, girl, like, I got, like, the dirt, I'd be like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Versus, like, thanks, ma'am.
Ugh.
I don't, like, no. But I'm a fan of ladies, which isn't bad. And also, after spending so much time in Texas, I'm all about y'all. Because guys bothers me. Okay,
Yeah.
but here's the backstory. And you know a bit of this backstory. Like,
I do.
I've always said y'all somewhat ironically.
True.
Because of a professor in grad school.
Mm-hmm.
And so every time I would say it, like, I would have this smirk, but no one would know, like, why I was smirking, and no one would understand why I was saying y'all with that tone.
Got it.
But it was because it was, like, I was secretly reminiscing about, like, my grad school professor crush. But now after spending so much time in Texas, y'all just, like, 100% fits, and it speaks to, like, the non-gendered
language. Yep.
Yeah, so I'm totally cool with it. Anyways, to the topic. I don't know why I felt like that was really important. But I think
So you can intro with, hey, girl, hey.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So yeah.
And it's your justification.
Exactly.
Your defense of your opening.
Mm-hmm. It's my podcast, and I'll intro how I want.
It's a lesson learned.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. Words matter.
They do.
It's funny because I'm totally the person that's like, words matter. And with certain people, I'm like, Jesus Christ, we all know what you're trying to say.
Right? But know your audience.
Yeah.
Another lesson.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
We're all about things we've learned.
Know your audience, be flexible, and what works in one situation isn't going to work in the other.
That's right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And one way to kind of know if something worked in one situation or another.
So smooth.
Is
Yes. One way that we learn these lessons is through
I can't even.
year in review.
Okay, but the actual segue into this was going to be in last week's episode.
Oh, right. We even talked about this before we started recording.
In last week's episode, we talked about, like, one way to kind of get through the holidays and everything is to, use the downtime to look at, like, the bigger picture of everything and to start planning and
Right.
look forward and just kind of, like, take a step back and embrace the fact that you can do that.
Because you don't necessarily have, like, a super crowded to-do list.
Yeah. Which is weird because, like, the holidays are super stressful, but then, like, job-wise and work-wise, like, professionally, so often it's not.
Yeah.
Depending on, like, event planners. I don't want to hear it. I know you're nuts.
We know that there are jobs where that is not true.
Yeah. Well, at Disney, we work when others play. Like,
Right.
That's one of the things that they say. All of this is to say, for a lot of folks, you have time to step back, look at what's coming up. Also, I totally blanked out and I was like looking at my notes. I was like, what was I going to say? What's the topic?
This is why we don't batch record anymore.
Aside from looking at what is to come, yes, The other thing, and I'm a huge fan of it, is doing a bit of a year in review. Like
So important.
both personally and professionally, I think that that is key. And I think if we look at it in terms of like a quote unquote, and I hate this terminology, but I'm going to roll with it, like a well-rounded like life thing, it would be like personally, professionally, and like relationships. Like
Mm-hmm.
things to kind of like look at like how's this all going?
Yeah.
Because each one of those affects the other one.
True. Because
So
we're not separate, right? We're
exactly.
whole people,
Fucking novel idea.
right?
So but like why?
For the year in
Why?
review,
Yeah,
why?
why? Like
So
I know I like it,
important.
but I also know that it's a little bit of a habit.
Yeah, well, you have to do frequent reviews,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
And maybe even if you're just going to do it like the big one once a year,
Mhm.
how else are you going to figure out what worked? What didn't?
Mhm.
What did you learn from it? What are you using to measure your success? Are those
Yeah.
even the right
Mhm.
statistics, metrics, whatever you want to use, right? Like, how do you know if you never stop and
If you
think
never take
about
time
it
to look back. And I
or
think
to
like
reflect?
I think the year-end review, at least on a personal level, is so beneficial and can be so important because I know for a lot of us, holidays are also a time to see family, and all of a sudden, there's this like huge influx and like rise in comparisonitis. Like,
Yeah.
Sister Jill is over there, like running the world, and I'm here with the same job that I've had for a couple years. Like, all of these things, right? But then a year in review lets you step back and really like challenge whether or not you've grown and how you've progressed versus just kind of like having that comparison situation going on with family, friends, like cuz everyone like in all of those fucking group gatherings and stuff, everyone's putting their best foot forward, right? Like everyone wants to
It's
make
like
it look like
Instagram in party form.
it's the yearly high school reunion, which is bullshit.
Ugh. But I think
Mhm.
also like year in review gives you a chance, like you were saying, like what are the facts versus
Mhm.
what are my feelings?
Facts
And
versus feelings.
right. And also to make sure your business can be responsive
Mhm.
rather than very reactive.
Yeah.
When we don't know what's working, when
Mhm.
we don't know what isn't working, we
Mhm.
tend to be more reactive, just kind of like, I'll try this, I'll try that, I'll try this, I'll try that. But
Mhm.
when you can be more reflective in a personal way, in a professional
Mhm.
way, it gives you a chance to respond to things
Mhm.
in a more deliberate way.
Yeah. Well, and documenting like the year in reviews and everything can be really essential, especially I would say for entrepreneurs, where if you're in like if you've recently been in like the first few years of your business, like I would say like first year to like first 5 years really, once you're in those later years, then you have this data to like go back and start to see like year over year trends that can help
Mhm.
inform like what to expect from your business, how your business, like what your industry looks like seasonally and stuff, because it's pretty hard, like from a small business perspective, to know how seasons will influence like your business. Like there's an
Mhm.
industry thing, but then it's different because with entrepreneurs, like it's so like personality based and everything, like understanding how you respond and how you like find those upticks and navigate all that stuff. Like looking back on not just the year, but if you do the year in reviews and pull out like 2015, 2016, all that stuff, look at it and how like I don't know. I think that it allows for a really unique ability to gather some metadata.
Yep. And also to problem solve,
Mhm.
to streamline your
Mhm.
processes, right? Otherwise, we're just doing the same thing kind of blindly year after year.
Mhm.
And that may work, it
Mhm.
may not work. So
Mhm.
yes, it gives us a chance to celebrate our awesomeness.
Mhm.
It gives us a chance to say, these things aren't working so well.
Mhm.
What can I do to improve upon those?
Mhm.
It gives us a chance to say, I was trying to measure my success in this way, but that really isn't working for me as like a
Mhm.
measurement tool. So, what would work better?
Mhm.
Oh, well, this happened and it was pretty significant.
Mhm.
So, I'm going to add in and track that
Mhm.
very deliberately, conscientiously, right?
Yeah.
So that whole
Yeah.
responsiveness piece.
So I know like my year in review strategy, I've kind of like honed and tweaked and kind of made my own. And I know for folks that maybe if they haven't done it, it
Yeah.
could be super overwhelming.
Mhm.
What would you say would be like kind of a starter way to frame up a year in review?
I think like the biggest thing is make a list of questions that you're curious about in regards
Mhm.
to your business, right?
Mhm.
Like, what did we accomplish this
Mhm.
year?
Well, yeah, I mean, it can be as simple as kind of like, that daily question that you do around like the dinner table, like high, low,
Yeah.
something I learned, something like that to really kick it off. Like, it doesn't have to be super intricate. It doesn't have to be like a new form of a business plan or like it doesn't
Mm-mm.
have to be like a true business review, but it's time set aside with a little bit of a framework.
Yeah. So, like, what did we accomplish?
Mhm.
What did we learn?
Mhm.
What were the things that were bigger disappointments or things that we thought would be really successful and that weren't?
What could we have done better?
Mm-hmm.
What were the biggest surprises?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Did we have unexpected financial stressors?
mhm.
What was happening around those times,
Yeah.
right? Unexpected expenses. How
Mhm.
can we have a better plan going into next year? So there's
Mhm.
lots of questions depending on
Yeah.
what you are trying to figure out. And
Mhm.
um, I think so. You're right. It doesn't have to be like don't reinvent the wheel.
Right.
Just go in with some basic
Mhm.
questions that you're just trying to answer, right?
Mhm. Well, and for entrepreneurs especially, like, you could be looking at it like, "Is this the year that I grow my team?" Things like that. Like, if you're thinking growth in the next year, one thing to really consider that I would kind of, like, suggest to include in the list of questions would be, "What did I love? What was I not a fan of?"
Hmm.
Because that can help inform you of, like, where your growth would be best, like, focused,
Where to focus your energy most
Mhm.
effectively.
And, like, what role would need to be, like, created in order so you can work effectively and, like, essentially, like, grow your team
Hmm.
to where it's operating, like, more optimally,
Yeah.
you
No,
know?
all good ideas. So I think
Mhm.
we've given some ideas here, but like
Mhm.
we say all the time, we provide frameworks, but the details are going to be different for everybody.
Mhm.
So you want to ask some basic questions. What those
Mhm.
questions
Mhm.
are really up to you and what you're trying to figure out. And
Mhm.
also, maybe you'll think of one once you start,
Yeah.
right? So you can add it to the list.
Mhm.
Like, I think sometimes when we try to do business plans, year in
Mhm.
reviews, like we think we have to have a really big set structure to get going. And I think
Mhm.
even if you have two questions, get started. It's going to take you more than like a day.
Yeah.
So you're going to have some time to kind of
Mhm.
think with it and see what also the
Yeah.
data is telling you and data always generates more questions,
Yeah.
right? Like that.
Yeah. It's impossible for us to come up with all the questions because the questions would be different depending on responses,
Well, and
right?
everybody's business is so
Yeah.
unique, right? Like I don't know.
Yeah.
It
Mhm.
it just depends. Like what I'm asking myself as a psychologist
Mhm.
is different than what you're asking yourself,
As whatever the hell I am.
right?
Yeah.
As a project manager, as an
Uh-huh.
entrepreneur, like
Yeah.
just the things you're going to ask are different from the things I'm going to ask. The
Mhm.
framework will be the same,
Mhm.
but I need to know like more specific things,
Mhm.
right?
Exactly. And the other thing is like we get so caught up in the moment, and so much has happened between like January of this year and where we are now.
Mhm.
So often we forget that we may have already done the work.
Yeah.
Like we may have already done something that we could review. Like if you put goals together, chances are you have it in a Google Doc, you have it in a notebook, you have it
Somewhere.
somewhere.
Yeah.
Think about where it is. Go find it and check that out.
Yeah.
I mean, chances are you didn't hit all of them, but chances are you're also not like you're not the same person
You're
that put
not
those
somewhere at
goals.
the you're not at ground zero, so to
Yeah.
speak, right? You're somewhere in this process.
Yeah, and you could have let certain goals go and been like, okay, like somewhere around April, you may have been like, you know what? I don't need you anymore.
Mhm.
Things like that. But don't feel like you don't feel like you have to do all the work because chances are you've done some of the work already.
Yep. And the other thing I would encourage is like focus on success first. It
Mhm.
is so easy. Our brain is kind of programmed to focus in on the things that didn't go so well, focus in on the fact that maybe we aren't where we wanted to
Mhm.
be with our goals. But that doesn't mean we didn't have success.
Mhm.
That doesn't mean we didn't have areas of growth that were really amazing. And so I would really encourage people
Mhm.
start with amazing accomplishments first because it's
Mhm.
easy to like let those focus or let those
Mhm.
fall away,
Yeah.
not really catch them and recognize them for what they are.
Mhm.
And it'll start you in a better kind of mindset when you go into the stuff that's a little more problematic.
Yeah. And that helps really fuel like the bigger picture for next year,
Yeah.
right? Like if there are things that have gone well, there are things that you're going to be excited about and want to pick up again and want to capitalize on and really where like the good stuff kind of happens for you and your business.
Yeah, I mean, even thinking about this podcast,
Mhm.
yes, we're not using our Insta as well as we want to.
Mhm.
There are things that we're not doing as well
Mhm.
as we want to, but that doesn't mean that we haven't had some really tremendous success this year. And
Mhm.
so and especially I know for me, because I'm really about improvement and it's easy for me to forget about those
Mhm.
things, right? Like,
Yeah.
man, we're not doing these things as well as we want to. Oh, but hey, we grew our listenership by
Mhm.
this much,
Yeah.
right? Like, that's a big deal. And so
Mhm.
don't forget about those things. They're
Yeah.
important and they're the things that feed us and keep us going and
Mhm.
um, help us to have some energy going into the new
Yeah.
year to fix those things that are a little more
And
sticky.
like reviewing the good stuff also, what I love about it is it helps show like there are many paths to like one goal.
Hmm.
You know, like I didn't launch this podcast the way that like so many people say you should
Right.
do it, right? Like everyone's like you need to have 5 or 6 like stock ones that are ready to go and then you launch and you need to like really push for reviews and all these things and I'm like I didn't do it that way. And like we cracked like some charts this year. We did things that objectively speak to a successful podcast and it's just it helps show that like it gives you that confidence for the next project in the year to come and everything. Even if you get overwhelmed with like the well it should be this way, you can be like, well, I didn't do it the way that like is prescribed for like this other thing, so I'm going to go try and make shit happen.
And remember, like, you're unique individuals.
Mhm.
So your processes, I would hope, are going to be as unique as you are
Mhm.
and aren't just going to be some cookie cutter version
Yeah.
because, like, you aren't cookie cutter.
Mhm.
I say you talking, I'm
All the people.
to all the people.
Mhm.
Like, you aren't cookie cutter. You're unique and amazing and you have
Mhm.
tremendous gifts. So I would expect to see that in the way you run your
Mhm.
business, not just
Yeah.
following like do step 1, 2, 3, 4.
Mhm.
Like, what's interesting, exciting, and fun about
Well, and
that?
especially for like the entrepreneurial set, right? Like
Yeah,
we didn't start shit to do things the way that it's always been done.
right?
That's boring.
You guys are trailblazers.
Yeah. I mean, something you said for not reinventing the wheel. And
You're gonna do
it's
your own.
all
You're gonna have
yeah.
put your own spin on it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So we kind of already also talked about like how are you measuring? What's
Mhm.
your data? What are you tracking?
Mhm.
Are some of the things just like, well, I'm not going to track that anymore. That's
Mhm.
not very useful to me. But this would be really interesting.
Mhm.
So it's like, what are your metrics? What are your tests?
Mhm.
What are your stats?
Yeah.
What's your data?
Mhm. And one thing to think about while one thing that helps inform those pieces is what is the goal with the review? You
Yeah.
know, like what am I trying to figure out?
Mhm.
Am I looking to figure out why am I looking to figure out why my podcast wasn't number 1 in business for 6 months straight? Like am I trying to answer that question
Right.
or am I trying to answer what what was the reason for the growth during these months and why did it stop? And, you know, stuff like that. Like if you're reviewing, once you look back at your year, you're going to have some things that you're like, well, I want to know more about this. And that's going to inform how your review is done, which then helps you decide what data you're looking at.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about design, right?
Mm-hmm,
Like when
mm-hmm.
we learn about research in grad
I was
school,
going to say, we're not speaking from like a research background at all, are we?
not at
No,
all.
no.
But the way you design your study,
Mm-hmm.
the questions you want to ask,
Mm-hmm.
determine the statistics that you're going to use,
Yeah.
right? So if you're comparing groups, that's one thing than just tracking something and trying to find relationships between things.
Mm-hmm.
That's a different question, different statistics. It's
Mm-hmm.
just like that in business.
Yeah.
Trying to answer what worked, you're going to track certain things.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to figure out what didn't, you may track other things,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that, yes, design is important.
Design is important. And I mean, really, I feel like it kind of circles back to the using all of this data to look ahead,
Yeah.
to be able to best plan for the year that's coming up
Mm-hmm.
the way you want to.
Yeah. Strategically,
Mm-hmm.
thoughtfully,
Yeah.
ready to go.
Mm-hmm.
Because this sounds so cliche, but like knowledge is power. It is though. If you don't know, if you're like, what worked in your business, and you just kind of shrug your shoulders, you're like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, then you're just
Mm-hmm.
shooting in the dark.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if you're like, what worked? Well, I know these 5 things did,
Mm-hmm.
so I'm going to strengthen those 5 things
Yeah.
because I know that they worked. I know they led to growth. I know
Mm-hmm.
they led to improvement. I know they led to all the things that
Mm-hmm.
I want.
Yeah.
Then you can do it.
Yeah. And the thing is, like, if there's things that happen like once or twice, like that are random, and you try to do it again and they don't work, that tells you maybe it wasn't a system. But if you start to notice a pattern and you institute that pattern and you find that it works, you have a, like, I can't come up with the word.
You have a system,
Yeah. I was going to put
right?
a word before system, but yeah, exactly. You have something that you can know and trust and kind of go to and start to kind of like operationalize and maybe even pass off.
Yeah.
So then you can go do other fun things.
Right. So, I mean, it's a lot of work,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, this isn't going to be done when you have like a free afternoon.
I have 20 minutes. Let me do my review.
Right?
Yeah.
But I think from my perspective that
Mm-hmm.
the design of the review is important.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why those questions that we were talking about in the
Yeah.
beginning are so important, because the questions that you're trying to answer are going to
Mm-hmm.
lead you down certain paths.
Yeah.
So, when you pick those,
Mm-hmm.
that kind of sets your overall design.
Yeah. And I would say bring in other folks. Like, we talk so much
Yes.
about, like, even if you're a one person show in terms of being an entrepreneur, the fact that like you probably really aren't.
You've got people.
Yeah. Ask them for their input. Like,
Mhm.
what did you think of how I just was this year? Like, did you notice the season where I was just losing it? Was there a month where I was a bitch? Like, things like that. Like, ask for that really brutal
So
feedback.
you asked that, and I was thinking, oh, they might have other ways of interpreting the data.
Oh, I'm like, go get like brutal feedback.
So get brutal feedback, but also data requires interpretation,
Mhm.
right? So that's why when you do research, you have a team.
Well, and this is why it's best to not just be a one person show.
Anyway, we totally went down different paths there, but you can see that's why diversity is important.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. Like, people will hear one thing, think of one specific like bunny hole to go down, and then
And you'll think of something else.
yeah,
And when you put it together, magic.
or something happens.
I think, but diversity of perspective is so important
Mm-hmm.
because they caught things that you didn't, and you
Mhm.
caught things that they didn't,
Yeah.
because everybody comes at it in a different way.
Mm-hmm. And both feel like positive And, like, it's not just negative, like, critiques or, like, "Geez, you missed this thing that didn't go well, like, you forgot about this." But also, like, "Oh, did you forget about, like, this huge win,
Mhm.
and how could you have forgot?" Like, things like that where, "Oh, shit, yeah, there was this whole thing that went really well, and I didn't even think about that." Maybe, like, because the last few months have been nuts,
Right. Yeah. So
So
bring in others to help you with
mhm.
this process, even if it's just little pieces of it or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, bring other people.
Mhm.
Yep.
Let's see.
What else do we want to say about this?
I think just that, like, it can feel overwhelming, and in terms of, like, speaking with other folks about it, like, now can be the season where everyone is posting, like, all of their wins and stuff or announcing, which is cool, and it's easy to celebrate, but also, like, maybe your review didn't go as great as, like, you thought it was going to. And it's really easy to get into this whole like comparisonitis, even with other entrepreneurs, or, like it wasn't as much of a positive thing as you thought.
Mhm.
But to your point earlier, like there still are wins. And if you're doing the year in review, that means you haven't given up, you haven't like lost the plot. It's about still holding on to that bigger picture. Like
Mhm.
even if things aren't what you thought they'd be, like, now is not the time to get caught in, like, the comparison game.
Yeah, don't.
Focus on your business, and the only one that's really gonna fight for it as strongly as you are is going to be you.
Mhm.
So, I mean, forget what other people say or think about it. I know that's so much easier said than done, but it's one of those things where, like, it's a blind leap, right?
Yep.
Like, it's one of those dreaded, like, hard marches you have to do.
I mean, nobody cares about your business the way you care about your
Mhm.
business. And why wouldn't you implement something that could help it be even more amazing?
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah.
So you have to put the care and the time and the
Mhm.
energy. Like we talk about it being like children, right?
Yeah.
like you you want to put the care and the time to nurture it.
Yeah.
And this is one way
Mhm.
to do it.
Yeah, and if you're looking around and if you see someone's business that, like, is just, like, completely, like, going nuts and is just so successful and everything, chances are that business is, like, a teenager and learning to drive. Chances are, like, your business is still, like, a little toddler, a little drunk, a little stoned, like have you seen that meme about, like, living with a two-year-old is like living with a stoned roommate?
Oh my god.
Both end up just eating fistfuls of cereal and, like, smothering toothpaste on the on the bathroom mirror.
So true. Now it's all I can see.
So it's like your business is still figuring its shit out.
Fair enough. But I think I just want to end with don't compare.
Yeah.
Right? When I work with individual clients, when they start to compare, like you just have to recognize like somebody's having a bad day.
Mhm.
How can we help?
Yeah.
And it's not by going down this road.
Mhm.
So we have to recognize that we're doing it
Mhm.
and like deliberately turn away from it.
Yeah.
Do something
Mhm.
else. Cuz all comparison does is make us feel like shit about ourselves, about
Yeah.
our business, about our lives.
Mhm. Yeah.
So,
It's one of those times to really just stay in your own lane.
right? And be disciplined.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm. On that positive note,
It is positive.
I'm still thinking about a stone toddler now.
She's not even with me right now.
It's not what I meant. It's a very good meme. I found it on BuzzFeed. Anyways.
And remember, if things didn't go well, that's part of business.
Mhm.
And we can learn our best lessons
Yeah.
from that. It's, failure can be thought of as learning.
Yeah. If you show up the next day, then it's still going great.
Awesome.
All right, guys. Happy holidays, and we will talk to you
Bye,
later.
friends.